if one of my kids or my dog runs through here, it's
That's
realities.
fine. That's life.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, so much. Okay, Amy,
Yes.
it's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so you are an amputee, but even though you were born without a leg, are you still, is it still considered an amputee or is there another name?
Technically it would be considered congenital. So I was born with a condition called PFFD, which essentially means, it stands for a lot of fancy words, meaning that you're missing some part of the femur bone, and that can vary. It varies very much between kids. But so they would technically say I have a congenital condition. Some people born with PFFD do have an amputation following. My parents were given that option, but given how much of a limb I had when I was born and a lot of complications that could go with the surgery at the time, they decided against it. So
And they
I've
would
actually,
do it as soon as you're born?
it depends. So I've met amputees that did have it within that first year. Most times, they do wait a few years for their body to develop just a little bit more. But it honestly depends on the kid. Because you'll see, if you notice, I actually met someone in the past 2 years that has PFFD, and she has a completely different shaped limb than I do. So it really just depends on that person.
What does that mean, shaped limb?
So when you're born, you have obviously there's some kind of like malformation of the femur bone, and so they call it your residual limb, and that is what typically goes inside of a socket, which is how the prosthesis, the fake leg, attaches to your body. So if you hear people refer to residual limb, that is what can be shaped differently. So an amputation typically is a nice, not nice, but an even, you can see where they shaped and cut the limb. If you have a mouth formation from birth, it can be maybe where a foot was supposed to be there, or if toes were supposed to be there, whatever that would be, that shape and size can all be different depending on the level of defect there was.
And when you, I've heard of the phantom limbs, or do you
Yeah,
have it or you don't because you never
I
had it?
don't. I don't, and thankfully, that only happens if you've actually had an amputation. So I've talked to people who were born with this birth defect that later had an amputation and went through it. Um, and sometimes there's amputees who never that never fully goes away. I have talked to a few amputees who have been amputees for quite some time, and phantom limb, if not goes away completely, is very, very dimmed, and it's more of a sensation than pain. But that's definitely a factor that I've always been glad that I haven't had to deal with, for sure.
Totally. What,
Mhm.
so you're the youngest of four, right?
Yeah.
What was it like growing up? Because you grew up in Pennsylvania, so you grew up in I'm sure rural
Yeah.
country
Middle
life.
of nowhere.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you probably don't even know it. People wear pants and you don't see it, but how was it growing up?
I had a pretty normal childhood, honestly. I was very I actually just talked to my siblings about this, but also my parents, of what was it like for them, because they didn't know that I would have this condition until after I was born. So it was kind of like a shock.
You're young. You're in your 20s,
I'm
30s?
Yeah, I'm 31, but it didn't show ultrasound. So
Is that
it
wild?
was yeah. So I mean, literally, my dad says I was born and he was looking for my leg somewhere. He was like, there's got to be something. And
It wasn't the skin was closed. It wasn't bleeding. It was
no,
just missing.
yeah, literally the leg just wasn't fully formed. So, and it's pretty high up. So there's it's not half a leg. There's very, very little limb there. But yeah, at the time it didn't show up, so they weren't expecting it. But my childhood, really immediately, it was just hey, well, we're going to figure this out. Obviously, small town, there's not a ton of resources readily available. So that's a positive, I think, that has come from the internet and social media over the years, of you're able to find that community a little easier. And I was very, very resistant to those groups. So my mom has said, if there's anything that I would do differently, I would be a little bit more forceful of bringing you places to meet other kids your age with this, because I so wanted to be normal. I had insecurities, but I didn't want to talk about them, so I didn't talk about them, and then that led to they becoming bigger in my head than they actually should have been. But it was normal. Like I had a very happy childhood. Like we loved to make jokes and have fun and laugh. Like we were all laughing about it the other day. And then like high school and middle school, college, like all of those typical insecurities you might imagine a kid going through, I
Mhm.
definitely experienced. And then when I came out to Nashville, I moved out after college in 2014, and it was just the first time that I had, because I even went to college like 20 minutes from my house. So it was like the first time really stepping away from everything I knew. And I felt this like, well, I can kind of be and do whatever, and no one has this preconceived idea of me, because I grew up saying I'm one of the most unathletic people ever.
But
And
you're not.
and I wasn't, and I didn't, it was this self-perceived limitation that I lived for many years, and realizing that just because you're bad at something at first doesn't mean that you're always going to be bad at it. And
Right.
so I would start something and feel uncoordinated and then just stop. And I was like, well, this is because of my leg. And it was just embarrassment and fear.
Mhm.
So once I started to realize that and put myself in more uncomfortable situations, like away from home, because I was already uncomfortable being away from home, I was like, I might as well do this. It just started opening up this like very unexpected journey from there. So
Yeah, I saw the video or the stories that you posted today, and I thought it almost like maybe I don't know why I've become such a pussy, but like so many things make me want to cry. I
uh-huh.
don't know if it's because I have kids, like I don't know. It
Yeah.
just came out of nowhere. I never and so watching
Yeah.
you story, and I'm like, but it's so true. It's so nice because you're taking your specific situation, but then in general, and it's true because people do victimize themselves and they do, oh,
Mhm.
poor me. And it's like, do you ever listen to, I'm guessing you must, David Goggins?
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard
Yeah,
that.
I love it. And you're like right on there with them. And it's like,
Mhm.
there's no excuses. Do it or
Yeah.
don't or whatever.
Yeah. And my having like honestly my siblings were very much that voice in my life. Like my parents too, but my parents were there more to protect and help. My
Hmm.
siblings were certainly there to do that, but they were more the ones to be like, suck it up kind of
Yeah.
situation. And I really needed that, because the reality is like everyone has stuff to go through, but even if yours is worse than others, moping is not going to change the situation. So someone telling you that it's okay to sit in your like victimhood or whatever you want to think
Yeah.
is not actual love.
No.
It's hard to hear, but like you're not helping them move on. And so I would get some talking to from my, and still do, from like especially my sisters, but they have been like the conversations that have changed the trajectory of what
Hmm.
I do in
Well,
a
thank
positive.
God you have them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, like, I mean, those conversations, obviously, like, I had to be the one to take action from it.
Mhm.
But if I hadn't had those challenging conversations, I don't know if I naturally would have thought, like, yeah, let's do this.
Was
Or
there any one thing, like an incident that happened that you're like, okay, I need to get out of this. Like I need to move myself.
I think there's several that happen, because it's not ever like an overnight change, but there are conversations that like I remember specifically that made pivotal points. Like the first one, really, really pivotal. Well, I guess the first one I had with my sister, like at the beach in high school, and I felt really like self conscious taking my leg off, and she, kind of looked at me and was a little fed up because I was very much like insecure and whatever. And she's like, Amy, I don't know why you're giving strangers this much power over your life. Like you can sit here and mope, or you can get in the water with us and have fun. But what you choose to do or what not to do isn't hurting their day; it's ruining yours.
Mhm.
So, like, this is your choice whether or not you want to make the choice. So I was not happy at the moment, but I've always held that conversation. And then actually, she married my now brother-in-law, and we were on a family beach trip like not long after they got married. And he's military background, he's very direct to the point, and really like kind of out of nowhere we were walking the boardwalk one night, and he started asking me like why I lacked so much confidence. And I mean,
Wow.
straight, he was just like, yo, you look at like, you don't look boys in the eye, you look at the ground when you walk, you always cover your leg, like what's up with this?
Yeah, and you're so pretty.
Yeah,
Like
thank
the
you. But he literally said, as cheesy as this analogy is, I almost started crying at the time because he was like, it's like you've been living like you're this ugly duckling and you're a beautiful swan. And you're like, you need to like start living like the swan.
What's wrong with me?
Oh, same. I cry. Yeah, I got emotional. And it was just the first time that I was like, because my family obviously had always told me that,
Yeah.
like, or like a similar message of
Yeah.
you're beautiful the way you are. And, this doesn't have to shape or like hold you back. And I believed it to an extent, but there's something about like someone outside of your
Not
life.
family.
Yeah. And he said this, and he was a male. It was just like I had really big insecurities about men in particular finding me attractive. And it was just this moment of like, has this been me the whole time? Like, am I actually able to change the narrative I've made myself?
Mm.
And it was like nothing overnight, but he said, we're gonna play a game and I'm your Yoda. And he was like, you're at a confidence level 3 and we need to get you to 10. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you like tasks to do that make you uncomfortable, and you have to like fulfill them, and then I'll tell you when you're going up the ladder of confidence.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah, and so it started really small, but like, I mean, again, I was a sophomore in college.
What was the first thing?
It was literally like put on a skirt and go in public. Like that was the level that I was at. Like I didn't, at this point, I still carried a foam cover over my leg. And
What is that?
it's like a cosmetic cover that they blend and fit and put over the prosthesis. So now you look at it and it's like a black metal leg.
Okay.
Transformer-ish. They try to make like as much of it's like tights material, like it's foam and then covered with tights, so you try to blend in. Ironically, what would happen is I would get more stares because people could tell that something was off, but they didn't know whether it was like a cast or a leg.
Yeah.
And I found that I might get more stares initially, but it's faster because there's not a lot of people asking. I used to get all the time because I also had a much bigger limp. People would come up and say, are you okay? Now it's like they know what's up.
Yeah.
It's like we're moving on. And that certainly changed with how I carried myself too. But I mean, I told him, and he was like, get rid of the cover. And I told him, I was like, I can't do that. Like, that's terrifying to me. And then 3 years later, maybe 4, I was in Nashville and wanting to get a new leg made. And I had just started boxing at this gym. It's like my first public gym experience for group fitness classes ever. And I like went to the prosthetist and I was like, what do I need to do to be more active? And he was like, take the cover off. And I was like, okay. And it was like this, almost like this metaphor, and just, yeah, I was like, all right, let's show it. Let's just keep going. And it really led me down like to where I am today.
Because you're so athletic.
Thanks.
I mean, all I can do is, kind of stalk you and see what's going on there. But like you do more than most people do. Like most people have so much fear and they don't want to snowboard and they don't want to do this and that. But you're doing it all.
And what I always like want people to understand is like, I was not that way. This was not like an Amy has been like secretly hiding her athleticism and one day she blossomed. It was like, now I feel more confident and athletic going into situations because I have previous experience of learning. But I came in with nothing. Like no coordination skills, like no practice. There's a natural stubbornness and like resilience of, in order to take a step, it's really hard to take a step. So I'm used to doing hard things. So once I realized I can get good at this, I'm okay if it's hard, as long as I know that I can get better and that there's like hope to get better. Once I got that in my mind, it was like, all right, I might not be naturally athletic, but I can get pretty athletic. And that is what has happened. So like I do not walk into a situation and like get it immediately. I've just know not to quit and have now gained enough balance and strength and coordination that I'm not afraid to do those things. But if you had met Amy 10 years ago, like night and day. Like people from college and high school probably see what I'm doing now and they're like, the only reason we know that's Amy Bream is because she's missing a leg. It's like very different.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a different, it's almost like I mean, it's not the same analogy, but in my head, this is what makes it seem like when you learn how to handstand, once you find that balance.
Yep.
And so when you find your center of gravity with the single.
Yeah. It very much is. And that's like I tell amputees that all the time, where it's like, yo, like this is going to be hard, but you just have to get through a couple humps of like understanding how to walk with it and walk without pain and figure out balance. And once you do that, it's like, people talk about confidence. Like, yes, sometimes there's a fake it till you make it situation. Absolutely. But like real confidence comes from like understanding what's on the other side of it.
Mhm.
Like I feel confident now to know I might go into a room, pardon my French, but like scared shitless.
Yeah.
But I've had enough experiences to know that I've gotten over previous situations that were really scary to me and I came out okay on the other side. So I can walk in with confidence, not saying like I know what's in front of me, but I know that I can get through it.
Hmm.
And that comes from experience, which means you have to be uncomfortable a lot of times to get the experience. So
Totally. Are you working? Like, is that what your job is? You're working with amputees, or what do you?
So now I am. So for the past 6 years, so I started I started working out at that boxing gym in 2015.
Mhm.
And fast forward, like probably 2018, I actually started working as their operations director. So
Nice.
I did that for 6 years. They had two locations when I started, then we added a third while I was there. So I managed the operations of the gym, which it just kind of naturally helped with my journey because I had started my Instagram account around the same time that I started working there, maybe a little before. And so my lunch breaks would be like my workouts. So that's when I started like weightlifting. Like I'd never touched a barbell before 2019. Like I didn't even know what like bench press was. Like I was like newest of the new.
Wow.
And so it kind of all went hand in hand. And I worked as operations director there for 6 years. And then I started competing in CrossFit in 2021. And that opened up a lot of opportunity I wasn't expecting. I literally started CrossFit with like, let's see what this is. Like, I don't know, like, what's gymnastics? It was like, I had weightlifted on a timer, but that's where my experience ended. Like my cleans were terrible. I had never done a barbell snatch or any kind of snatch. Skills, like all of that stuff, I didn't know what I was doing. But it just kind of naturally led to this progression. And then, so I competed and worked there full time up until actually this past August. And then at that point, now I do like coaching, working with not just amputees, but some amputees
Mhm.
one on one. I have some programs, an adaptive program actually coming out soon. And then I do like speaking engagements. So that's primarily what I do right now.
That's awesome. Is there a big population of amputees?
It actually is. I mean, I guess it's all relative. Like in reference to the full population of the world, it's
Mm.
small, but there's a lot of amputees, especially in the social media space, more than I expected. Because when I started my account in general, I actually started it from the perspective of for non-amputees because
To educate, kind of thing?
yeah, educating because they're so like you meet someone in public and usually the assumption is they're a veteran and you also don't know how to even broach the subject with them. Like, so a lot of people I found, like, I don't know if I've actually ever encountered a person that clearly has like an evil intent, when they ask me questions. I've never encountered that. Even if they're like, their delivery isn't great, they're not trying to be mean.
Yeah. They're probably
Um,
just nervous.
yeah, they're nervous and they just don't know. Like, if you've never met someone with that situation, how do you know what questions to
Mhm.
ask? And so I had found that had been in that situation long enough. I've had every question and situation under the sun. I was like, I really don't get offended by that. Like I've processed my stuff, I'm good. So I will just educate so that they can learn because I think it's interesting and then know how to have those conversations if and when they meet an amputee.
Mhm.
And so that was my original intent and thought process. And then as the account continued to grow, that's when I started meeting all of these amputees. And especially like my favorite is like young girls that are like doing that and just have questions about like body image and how to do things in the gym. And because I actually had never spoken to someone with a birth defect or really even an amputee seriously until I was 24. And I know that's
Wow.
crazy to say, but again, small town, I didn't seek it out. And like, of course, I met amputees in passing, but it was never like a let's stop and have a conversation
How
ever.
come?
I was determined to blend in. And I also, like, I'm 31, I know that's young, but even like marketing for amputees and for like adaptive sports is really new. Like I would say in the last 10 years, because when I grew up, even in commercials, like I
Yeah.
never saw anyone that looked like me. It
Yeah.
was Paralympians or is geriatric.
Hmm.
So, as simple as that thought might sound, I didn't even know there was a place for me. Like I didn't actually have the thought process that there are other girls my age who just want to live life and be cool.
Yeah.
Like it was
Fair.
just, I never saw it. And so I moved to Nashville, which again, bigger city, like a little more opportunity and people around. And I went to a prosthetic clinic and I said, hey, I want to be more active. What do I want? Like, what do I need? What do I do? Help me. And one of the doctors there was like, I want to get you in touch with this person. She's actually a rep for, at the time, she was a rep for like selling a particular kind of prosthetic knee. But she's like, she reminds me a lot of you in personality. And she's a few years older than you. And I think it would just be helpful to have a conversation. You can ask her and she'll like tell you pretty plainly. And we actually became friends. And I remember like she called me on the phone and it was the first time in my life that I had someone, she like said some statement that was like, oh, well, when you walk and you like have this feeling, you think the leg's going to do this or whatever. And it was like the most simple, random statement. She didn't think twice. She kept talking. But I almost started crying on the spot because it was the first time that someone could speak my language.
Mm.
Because up until that point, they were very good at their job, but all the doctors and people that I would tell, like, tell me how to not limp, how to do this, they all had two legs.
Hmm.
They were trying to imagine how it would feel, but they didn't know. And this was someone that like said words that were in my mind before I said them. And I never had that experience. So then as we became friends, I was like, do you date? How do you approach this subject?
She is
Like,
an amputee too?
yeah,
Okay.
she had, I believe she has had an amputation, but she was also born with a birth defect. So she's
Okay.
had birth. Um, so it was just like, that was literally like transforming for me to like get to know her and like be able to have those conversations. And she was like, in some ways like a sister to me. And so as I kept sharing my story, I was like, I want to be that for other girls. Like, not in like a weird way, but just like if they
Yeah.
have questions, like, yeah, I'll talk about the awkwardness, like, because it was so helpful for me to have. So,
Well, what is the weirdest question you've been asked?
mm.
Or what are some weird ones?
Well, I would say, I won't say even weird. I would say like intrusive.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot, especially on the internet. Like there's a lot of questions
Well, they're
about
keyboard warriors, so they have no shame. Just
exactly. So yeah, I mean, I've had questions like one, to, just how to live life and things, and like with dating in particular, I've had questions like, like when you have sex, do you do this? Do you have that? Like those kinds of things.
why
And
does
I'm
it
like,
matter?
I know. I'm
Like,
like,
it's not like you're missing a vagina. Like,
exactly, exactly. But I would have those types of like, do you still have this? I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't understand. Biology, anatomy, like you're confused. But anyway,
look at a skeleton, buddy. Like,
no, right? So like those conversations, but I do even like with her, I wanted to ask questions like, how do you broach the subject of your leg? And the more that I learned and everything and like started to live, because I did never put myself out there with guys. I was just so self-conscious. And my brother-in-law had said this to me and I started to live it, and he was right. It's like people respond to the energy that you give. So it's like, to me, when I used to be being set up on dates or anything, it was a huge, like this huge anxiety feeling of like, they have to know about my leg, they have to, and I made it a big conversation where like, even if someone asked me out, again, cosmetic cover, I'd have to say like, yeah, but I want you to know XYZ, I have one leg. Now I don't even think twice about it. It's like if a friend sets me up, I'm like, hey, like, yeah, just give them a heads up that I have a prosthetic leg before we meet, I'm cool. And like on the dates themselves, I probably can count on one hand the amount of times the topic has even come up on like a first date of just like, I don't
unless you
mind if
brought it up because you felt like, yeah.
yeah, and I don't mind questions or anything, but it's like we've had enough other things to talk about that it didn't even cross my mind of like, oh, I should bring this up. It's like, no, just like,
It's so interesting because when we talk about it, it's like, well, duh, you're a normal chick. Like, we're
mm-hmm.
sitting here, I see you, you're
Yeah,
normal.
Yeah.
But I could imagine it being like a weight where you feel like,
Yeah. And it is like, even since moving here, like one of my best friends is like, he's a guy, and I remember having conversations when I first moved here, and like now we'll talk, and he's like, you're like a different person, because like to even talking about dating or whatever, he's like, you, this used to be a huge fear factor for you, and now it's like, no, it's really the energy and confidence that you bring into the situation, because whether or not you realize it, it's like you subconsciously, it's the same idea of like girls in the gym. Like
mhm,
half the time, if I go into the gym thinking that girls are going to be like bitchy or mean,
yeah,
I am that way.
correct.
And then once I like bring myself down, it's like, you say hi first.
Yeah,
99% of the time, they're really nice.
yeah,
It's like it's like whether or not you think that you're acting a certain way, what you're projecting is like coming out from you. Like, so it's
100%.
just, you want people to respond to you confidently, like you be confident with them. So,
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, it's the gym is also such an interesting space.
mhm,
And because I feel like because you're in that space and once you get confident in that space,
mhm.
confidence is everywhere.
Yes. Yeah, I always recommend, obviously, like going to the gym and fitness. Funny, I think I love that about CrossFit, because CrossFit is, I've never found it personally to be a space where people, I know things happen for sure, but it's not a space where people obsess about like calorie counting so
Hmm.
much, or like even working out for a specific physique. Um, those are just kind of natural progressions of most, and this, I know this doesn't cover every single person, but
Yeah.
as a community as a whole, it's more like, let's find out how much we can do, and the rest naturally comes.
Hmm.
So it's like, yeah, you want to do all these cool things, you have to fuel yourself properly, stop avoiding rice.
Hmm.
Like and it's like, I personally love that, but like the way that I've learned to carry myself in the gym has like absolutely poured out into every other aspect of life. So when I tell people like get into a routine, it's not coming from a like a, you have to look a specific
Hmm.
way. Like, yeah, foundational health is really important, but this is going to affect every aspect of your life in a positive way if you do it healthily. So,
It's an interesting I think time that we're in because it's like there's this big transition phase that's happening of like so many more people want to be healthy and get their proteins and like
mhm.
skinny is not a thing anymore really, and people want to, women specifically want to
Yeah.
be
Mhm.
strong and have muscles, and it's really cool to
Yeah.
be in that space and see it. I was going to go somewhere with that, I can't remember now, I completely just bonked, but
Okay.
yeah, no, it's an awesome space, and I think with CrossFit specifically the community is like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I even think back to like the early 2000s when it was like skinny and like you can't eat because that's
Yeah,
not,
that's a
yeah,
thing.
it was very different. Yeah. So I'm very much glad that we have transitioned on, and it's more about like strength and just like figuring out your capacity. Like that is so much more fun too, because yeah, well, that phase was not a fun time of fitness.
Totally. What is what's your favorite sport?
Mm,
Like that you know, whether it was
yeah.
hard to learn or easy to learn or
Um, So if I'm personally participating, I like more like unconventional sports. Like I wouldn't say like I'm not going to sign up for like soccer anytime soon, But I honestly, I just tried snowboarding a couple weeks ago, and that was really fun. I
I
don't know
saw
if
the
it,
video.
yeah, it's not something that I would probably sign up for competitively, only because I'm a sunshine gal, like snow.
Totally.
That's that season. But I was like, oh,
Where did you go?
so I was in Colorado. I was in
Nice.
Denver. So we just went to a place like the bunny slopes of
Yeah, yeah.
Loveland. Um, so it was my first time, but I had so much fun. I was like, yeah, I definitely want to keep trying this. I tried skiing a couple years ago, and that was okay. But I think just like being, especially like above knee prosthesis, they typically recommend like at least at the time taking your leg completely off to ski, which was very exhausting.
Interesting.
Yeah, they give you like these poles to kind of like it's like cross country skiing, but you use it for everything.
Yeah.
Um, and mm, I liked snowboarding
Yeah,
better.
I could see. I mean, that I never saw that, and I love snowboarding. I can't wait to get my girls doing it. But that thing I saw you push off of that was indoor,
Oh yeah,
that
so I
was
was really
super cool. What is that?
it was some, I don't even remember the name of the place, but my friend, we went to visit, me and my friend went to visit other friends living in Denver, and she had scheduled this. She's like, I don't really know what to expect, but it's like an indoor ski snowboard practice. And literally it was like turf, and it was just moving. And so, and the guys that were running were literally like, this is actually harder than learning on snow. So if you get this down, you'll be better on the mountain. And we weren't sure we were even going to get to go to the mountain that weekend just because of weather and time constraint. So we started there and got like a feel for it. And it was literally just like they would turn it off and it would
Hmm.
move and you could practice. And then I enjoyed that enough that I was like, I want to be outside doing this.
Yeah.
Like, I want the prettiness and like
Yeah.
the longer ramp. The hardest part of that was like once you fell, there wasn't a lot of like place to go. Like, I wanted a full hill with opportunity to
Right.
fall and pick myself up, you know? So we did that the next day and it was really fun.
That is awesome. That yeah, snowboarding is special. It's
Yeah.
really so. How does it feel on your? Because I saw that you had your prosthetic on.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was good. I have talked to a few amputees since that like do Paralympic snowboarding, and I got kind of mixed like reactions of how to handle it because the biggest part obviously is weight distribution, and it's figuring out if you're supposed to ride like traditional or goofy, and
Hmm.
like with my prosthesis in front or back. And so I box non-traditionally. I box like I'm left-handed because it allows me to pivot to be able to kickbox and have my real leg behind me. So I
Mm.
do like a rear kick, but it's not a rear kick. It's, or yeah, it would
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
rear
I understand.
kick. So in my mind, snowboarding would be the same way. So you could turn and everything with that back leg and have more control. The trick is I'm still learning, as day one of how to distribute my weight. So most of the time that day, I was literally like, you can see in one of my videos, my board is just going back and forth. Like
Yeah.
I'm like one direction and then I have all my weight there. So it would just turn.
Hmm.
And like I literally couldn't choose which direction to stick with. So it's getting better at like balancing by the end of it, but I would definitely need like that would be the
Hmm.
what to focus on, like actually choosing a position and then figuring out how to go lean back and forth in whatever position I committed to. So
Yeah. I mean, that's a normal like
yeah,
dilemma when you go. So
yeah,
it's like it's very interesting, and obviously, well, maybe
hmm
not obviously because it is a lot of glutes too.
hmm
The one side is probably stronger, I would guess,
yeah.
than the other side, or they're both equal, like kind of.
One definitely one side is stronger. Yeah, that is actually one thing that a lot of like amputees need to work on, and that I always can get better at, but I have gotten a lot better at developing the adaptive side,
Mhm.
like the glute and the residual limb. It's important to like still grow those things.
Yeah,
It just usually takes a lot more like isolation exercise to do that. Um,
patience.
yeah, yes, very much. But that helped. And honestly, like the whole day, it was great. I think not I think, the most frustrating part of it was like walking parallel because I would
Mm.
keep my real leg on the board, but then I would have to push my prosthesis on the snow, which was slippery in itself.
Yeah.
So it felt like I was on ice constantly because I
Hmm.
was like, I can't push off of something that I can't feel that's slippy and then like have this. So half the time I would like just take it off and walk with it as far as they would allow me and then put my board on because they would be like, you have to put it on now. I'm like, chop your leg off and try this, buddy. Like it's kind of hard.
You see what I'm working with here?
But it was really fun though. So
That is awesome. Um, what else? What are other like I guess obstacles or funny instances you've had happen? Whatever, either way.
um I mean, I think there's a lot of like just everyday things that it's kind of like I mean, I broke my wrist in 15 or around there. And suddenly I realized how much I was taking for granted. It's like how annoying basic things are. I think that's probably more of the things that are the more frustrating. Like working out is whatever. It's more everyday things that frustrate you. Like walking in airports is a lot of walking. Every single time I travel, I'll get blisters by the end of the trip. And so it's just knowing that, knowing
From
like
the
the days.
prosthetic?
Yeah, so your residual limb is like on the socket and it's constantly rubbing. And then, especially when you're flying, there can be like air fluctuation changes. Sometimes it's not bad if it's a really long flight. Like, usually my limb tends to swell a little bit. And so, right after experiencing that, having to walk through a full airport, walking is like one of the most, ironically, the tiring things about having a prosthesis. Like, that will take a long hike, will take me out in the days following more than like the most intense CrossFit workout ever.
Wow.
Just because you deal with like blisters and things that are just like uncomfortable to even
Mhm.
take a step. Um, so like
What
it's
do you use
it's
for the blisters?
what do I do for
Yeah,
blisters?
that's a weird question, but I feel like I always
Okay.
get blisters from CrossFit, so I have like a
Yeah.
specific thing that I do.
So there's a vitamin E cream called Derma E, and you can get it on Amazon. But I've tried a lot of creams in the years. That has by far the most helpful. It's called Derma E, and I literally put that on every night, no matter if I have a blister or not. I put it on like the areas that are usually most uncomfortable from the prosthesis, and it just helps heal it kind of preemptively. And of course, when I get blisters, I'll put it on there as well. But
Do
I
you
tell
have
everyone.
callus there that help like not
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a callus for sure on my limb. It used to be more, well, I guess it used to be like rougher, but it's still there for sure. And it's just one thing that you just get used to. Like a lot of like the most frustrating parts are like when it's really hot and you sweat a lot. The like part of how most amputees attach their prosthesis, including me, is through suction. So there has to be skin contact that's suctioning to something. So you can imagine
Mhm.
when you're sweating, that suction will pull, and the leg can actually, depending on how it's fully connected, it can actually fall off. So, like during one of my competitions at the games, actually, we had to run, which hands down is the most tiring exercise for me. And of course, it's August. And
Oh
so
my
I
god.
sweat a ton in the socket. And by the time I got after that, it was legless rope climbs and then like push press. And I kept my leg on for the rope climb because I didn't want to lose time of taking it on and off. And my leg fell off from the top of the rope, and of course, like the judge isn't allowed to help me, so it fell from 15 feet ahead. I fall, and there's like a pin that attaches like
Oh my god.
multiple aspects, so I like drop and I look at my judge and they could point to it, but like I lost so much time on that workout just looking for my leg.
Oh my god.
And like those are the things that like are frustrating because you're like, this isn't a test of my fitness, this
Yeah.
is like just
My
a thing I
sanity.
roll over. Yeah. um, but it's just one of the things that you're like, if you go to any adaptive competition, and you realize pretty quickly, no matter what kind of adaptation you have, that you have a lot to be thankful for. So it's good perspective to have those things for sure.
Yeah, that is oof, it's crazy. Do you get a lot of I mean, I would it's a stupid question, but I would imagine you do. A lot of people who come up to you and tell you you're so inspiring to them and stuff.
I mean, I do,
Or
yeah,
people are like a little shy, they don't wanna say weird feel,
yeah, I do, and I think, I mean, it's always encouraging to hear for sure because I try not to. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but I try not to even like read a whole lot of comments and stuff on social media just because like
yeah.
I it's the internet, and
Mhm.
positive or negative, I don't need to like make that my world. um but it's a good accountability source to realize like, oh, this is like keep going kind of situation. And it also kind of makes me work a little bit harder. Not, I mean, that's for myself, it's not necessarily for other people, but you know I have an advantage in a lot of ways of when I go to a gym, no matter how much effort I put in, most people, unless they know me really well, are going to congratulate me no matter the effort that I put in, which is something that I talk to amputees a lot about. I'm like, you need to find your people that do not just know that you're there, but know what your capacity is and will push you. Um, and so, like, I know that I can go into the gym and, quite frankly, half-ass the workout, and someone probably will still say that was inspiring.
Mhm.
Whereas someone next to me might be going through like extreme anxiety and working out in public and give it everything, and they're not going to get the same accolade for me doing half the work.
Mhm.
And so, in that regard, I try to not half ass it, just like, quite frankly, out of like respect for those people.
Mhm.
Um, because it's like if I know that whether I ask for it or not, whether I want it or not, it's just a reality of like you have something very physically obvious to you that you have to overcome. People are going to give you accolades whether or not you deserve it. So make sure you deserve it. As
Yeah.
weird as that sounds, but I don't. That kind of came out kind of arrogant. I
No,
didn't
no,
mean to.
that makes sense. I think I felt that way when I was pregnant.
Yeah, yeah,
I get that. Like when people are like, "Oh, you're doing so good," and I'm like, "Actually, I feel like shit today. I don't feel like I'm not."
yeah,
But thanks.
yeah. 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 I always try to take the mindset like it's not about how hard it is, it's about what you're capable of. And if you're capable of doing it, hard or not,
Mhm.
in my opinion, you should do it. So,
Totally. I think
yeah.
that it's those conversations that you have with like your sisters and this lady, this girl or late whatever, she's
Mhm.
a couple years older than you.
Yeah.
It's like those are the conversations that really are so they really change everything.
Yeah. They really do. I like having the right people in your corner is very important. Not, I do believe that people can make it without that. Like that's not 100% necessary, but I do think that not having that limits some ways that you can grow and mature, even in like just various aspects of life, because you're always going to have blind spots. Like
Mhm.
that's part of being human, and having people that love you around you that can call you out when you need to, like, very,
100%. It's
very
the
important.
most important thing because if those people can't call you on your shit, then
And no one,
who's
yeah,
going to?
exactly. Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. Like I say that, but when it actually happens, 9 times out of 10, I'm mad. Like I don't like hearing that I'm wrong. Like, but I mean, even like this year, 3 weeks before the CrossFit Games, I had like a breakdown and I called my sisters and I had this huge venting pity party and I bawled for like an hour. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be an inspiration. Like, I'm exhausted. And they let me say my piece. And I was literally like just crying. And then they're like, all right,
Are you done?
Amy. Yeah, and like they just went in, and they did it in love, but stern love. It was
Mhm.
like snap out of it, and they're like,
Yeah.
"You will do this, and you have not come this far to make it end like this. Like you get your butt in gear." And I was mad. I was so angry because I knew that they were right, and I like did not want to like buckle up my bootstraps, and I was like, "Oh, I have to do this." Um, but it is literally what made the difference between that week for me. So yeah.
Are you a mentor? Do you have like a group that you mentor?
Somewhat I do. So I do free 6 week accountability groups for people. That's more of like a general community of people that like it's focused on for 6 weeks. You pick a specific goal, and I help walk you through like very practical steps of how to like accomplish from going A to B. Just being intentional with those things, and then I have templated workout programs where I give weekly feedback. And then most like the most personal, I think, thing, yeah, the most personal offer that I have is actually accountability coaching. So I work with people in that instance, one on one, and it's like it's hard to describe accountability coaching. You hear that and you're like, what's that? But essentially, I describe it to people like we'll sit down and, there's so much information in life. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed. And so it's like we sit down and we have a conversation of where do you want to be a year from now? And then we'll go through a whole lot of subjects throughout our time together. It's a minimum, like they work with me for at least 3 months at a time. But it's like we cover foundational health. So, like nutrition, sleep, workout, like all of that good stuff, goal setting, mindset, productivity. Like, really, they sound so cliche to say, but there are such minor
Mhm.
like steps that people can take to like get them on a much better trajectory. And we just cover those bits one little bit at a time. So when I talk to people, it's funny because they tend to be, I'm like, okay, where do you want to be? And they list like a ton of goals. And like, okay, I'm going to start with like these 5 things. I'm like, no, you're not. You're going to start with this one tiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll check in next week about adding maybe a tiny thing if you're ready, but probably sticking with that first. And it's just like, this is a long haul mentality. And by the end of our time together, like, you will not have all your dreams and goals accomplished, but you will have the blueprint of what you need to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's what I do, like, one on one with people.
And you can find the details on that on your handle. What is your handle? It's again.
Yeah. So Instagram handle is at one leg to stand on. So it's just, you write it all out. And then you can go to onelegtostandon.com or my name, amybream.com. And I have information on all of that. So like my fitness programs, accountability coaching, where to ask about speaking, all that good stuff.
Awesome. And the programs that you do, it's not only for amputees, or it's for everyone?
No, I have 2 programs. That amputee program is actually coming out in 2 weeks. It's called One Leg Up.
I like it. I like it.
But the other program I have is very much not, it's long-term periodization. It's a 12-month strength or hypertrophy and conditioning program. It's called Small Steps, Big Gains. So it's actually not CrossFit in particular. It's just more of the functional lifts, back squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press. And it's, your traditional upper lower program for people that want to just focus on like small things at a time, not necessarily like CrossFit skills, but they want to gain that confidence in the gym.
Yeah, I love that. I think that fitness is everything. Like it's really everything. I'm so glad that you found it, even though you were 24.
Yeah.
It's game changing. It's life changing.
It really truly is. And, people in the, well, I don't want to say on the outside of it, but maybe people that it's not something in their life, it's easy to look at as like a unhealthy, obsessive thing. And it's like, it's not that. It's movement creates motivation. And once you get that feeling of like, I can do this, you're like, let's keep going. And it doesn't have to be this unhealthy obsession. It's just of like giving you confidence of like, I can do life, like not just like fitness. It's like, I can do what I put my mind to. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's so wild because aside from the confidence it gives you, there's this thing that I always get, especially like from pregnancy to postpartum or having kids, and the people say, "Oh, it's so selfish. Why are you working out? Your kids." And I'm like, this is the best place for them to be. Like they should. What do you want them sitting in front of the TV? Like they hang, they have their jump rope, like they do all the things.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because it's like it's so much. It's not a vanity thing, and aside more than it's mental clarity. It's really puts everything in the gym, but also outside. It makes everything just better.
Yeah, it really does. And it's a great, environment, like example to, like have around your kids. And also there's something to be said where like it fills you up. And when you are filled up, you can give the best version of yourself to your kids.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. What is the most, I think, fulfilling thing that you do? Like what fills your cup?
Honestly, the accountability coaching, because I was like, I still one-on-one workout programs in particular, but I started that because I realized that people sometimes approach working out like a band-aid for a broken limb. And it's like, they're trying to make it fix a lot of things that there are other layers to. And so even with my programming clients, when we'd get on calls, I was like, you're making these huge leaps and bounds in the gym and you're not happy about it. So like let's peel that back a little bit. Like, are you sleeping? And we would just cover like other foundational levels. And it made me realize like, this is really what it's like people need to approach a lifestyle approach, not just like fixing this one aspect. And I just love people learning to like believe in themselves. And so realizing like some of my clients just telling me, like I'm better. And, some of them are specifically doing CrossFit. And one in particular was like, yeah, this has been great. Like I've learned so many CrossFit skills, but like, I actually believe I can do so much more now. And it's just like, yeah, that's what I love to hear. Like, let's keep doing that.
It's wild how you like it's so I see it, and I always go back to my kids because they're little, like 1 and 3. Like,
oh wow, yeah.
So when you see their confidence bloom, And especially as an adult, right? Like
Yeah.
having that change of not so confident and kind of just doing your own thing to like actually being confident, how
Yeah.
it just kind of takes over everything.
Yeah, it really does. It's amazing.
Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I like to talk, so I've talked a lot.
Oh, I have another question. Is there any, what would you, for people who are shy or have like, they don't know what to say when, how do you,
Approach. You mean like approaching an amputee in particular?
yeah.
Um,
Like if you want
I
to say something, but not feel, not like you're so good at life, you know, like,
yeah. I would honestly, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly how they're going to respond by don't talk about like, oh, you're so inspiring. Like I recommend most of the time their leg is visible. I'd say, yo, your leg looks awesome. Like say something like that, where it's like complimenting the hardware, and you'll be able to tell from their response whether or not they're actually open to conversation. So rather, yeah, it's because some amputees, like, they find they're almost like insulted when it's like, what are you inspired by me? Like walking in the grocery store, like they don't want to hear that. So it's kind of a safe opening to
Mhm.
feel out the waters.
Mhm.
And then like, again, they'll let you know pretty quickly by how they respond if they want to talk about it.
I wonder why people feel like they need to say something about it. Do you feel that with people?
It depends. I think it takes courage to say something. So like I used to be offended a good bit more than I am now about it. And then I realized I was like, they're not trying to be malicious. Like before I had the cover taken off, they were trying to make sure I was okay. And then otherwise they were either curious. And so the most that I found that you need to kind of like bring some boundaries around people is like, you don't want to feel like a circus animal like that, and that's the best way I can put it. Like sometimes people aren't quite aware of how they're coming across. Like I've been at the pool before, and like their kids will run up, and I have nephews, they ask all the questions. I love kids curiosity, but like I've had it before where the parents are just not aware, I guess, of what's happening, and the kids are just literally staring at my leg like, oh, get away from me. And I'm cool with it for a little bit, but like minutes.
Yeah.
And like talking about like my leg to
like you're not right there.
Yeah. And then it's like, hey, I'm just trying to like swim today. Can we not have this conversation? Like I just want to do my thing. So like that's the most that I've gotten that I'm not always like huge fan of. And like let's bring some boundaries and realize like I have eyes and ears and senses.
I'm a human, I'm right here.
Yeah, like let's be aware of the situation. But other than that, I really don't get offended.
Do you swim with it on? No, you take it off.
No, yeah, there are some swimming legs, but honestly, for most, especially above the knee prosthesis users, it's easier to take it off because it's just dead weight. Even if it floats, the amount of like you can get a waterproof cover, the amount of energy it takes to like make it flutter as an above knee, it's not worth it. It's not helping you propel. So at that point, it's just easier to use more arms.
Interesting. It's so interesting. Like it's not like, I know it's common, but it's not so common. So it's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. So, yeah.
Okay, that's it. I mean, I have a zillion more questions, but I know you have to go. So
you're good. But yeah, I appreciate your time too, because I know you're in the midst of a lot of craziness. So I thank you for taking out the time.
absolutely.
See you later.
Bye.